So my name is Andrew. You probably all also know me because my dad introduced me. My job here today is to talk about the foundation of the Kataeb party and its ideology. And I'm not going to just make it a list of, oh, we believe in this, this happened, this believe in that. Because our ideology is a story. It's actually part of a 6,000-year-old story, as I'll get to when I get to that part. I'm going to examine the ideology of the Kataeb through three of who I consider the most important people in the Kataeb and the broader movement that it stood for. Pierre Ismail, the founder, Charles Malik, and Bashir Ismail. Those three I consider the most important figures in the Kataeb party for different reasons, and each of them played an essential role in the Kataeb. Bashir Ismail was Pierre Ismail was the first. Pierre was Bashir's father. This was before World War II in the days of Lebanon being under French colonial rule. We had just been freed from the Ottoman Empire and we were placed under the French mandate per the League of Nations. Pierre Ismail, along with several other figures in Lebanon, was growing tired of the French occupation of the country. We were a colonial state. We wanted to be free. We didn't want to be just part of the French Empire. And he began to grow an anti-French resistance, part of the pro-independent Lebanese movement. Furthermore, in the 1936 Olympics, he traveled over to the Berlin Olympics in Germany at the time, and he was impressed by the disciplined organization that he saw in the fascist parties of Europe. However, this does not make the Kataeb party a fascist party, and I will get to this as we go on. The Kataeb party, it began as a party in 1932, when Antoun Saadeh founded the Syrian Social Nationalist Party, their interest was to essentially make Lebanon into a part of Syria, whereas the Kataeb wanted Lebanon to be an independent country the way it is today. Lebanon has always been fraught with others trying to encroach upon our sovereignty and our rights and to try to take away our identity. And the Kataeb's position will always be evolving and articulating to help us to preserve our identity. And you'll see as I follow this along, when we get especially to Charles Malik, who best articulates this. But Pierre Ismail was a pharmacist, and he was actually also the head of a football team, soccer. He loved sports. He was apparently the first Lebanese international referee for soccer. He loved sports, and he was a good pharmacist. And that shows the nature of politicians in Lebanon. A politician in Lebanon is often not just a politician. They'd often have a second job as something else like a pharmacist, or they're into something sports or even intellectuals, like Charles Malik. The Kataeb party was involved with Lebanese independence until the time of the Civil War, when Lebanon was already an independent country, but once again our independence was being threatened. The Cairo Accords threatened to pretty much send a ton of Palestinians and settle them onto our land, violating our sovereignty for the sake of other Arab countries. The Syrians, the Egyptians under, under Nasser, they wanted to unite the whole Arab world. And similar to the original sort of threat that the Syrian domination of Lebanon posed in the beginning with the Syrian Social Nationalist Party, the Arab movement was trying to do again. They were trying once again to extinguish the flame that was an independent Lebanon. Charles Malik was born way before the Civil War, and he grew up before the Civil War as well. He was born in Turram to an Orthodox family, and he was American educated in an American school in Lebanon. And furthermore, he even went all the way to America to study at Harvard University. And he was a master philosopher. He mastered so many philosophers. He himself studied under Heidegger until he left Germany due to the conditions that the Nazis brought, and he didn't like the Nazis. And he studied, and he was just not some nobody that we say in Lebanon. A lot of people know him in Lebanon because he was somebody. This man was the definition of a philosopher who cared for the people. He was a great statesman to the point where he made it to the UN. He managed to out-negotiate Turkey's seat, take their seat from them. And then he proceeded to make his way to the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Charles Malik was an author of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which not many people can say they were that. He came back to Lebanon, and when the Civil War began to break out in the 70s, in the 80s too, he authored a document that I consider the founding document of the Kataeb party. And it's not just me, even the CIA considers it. If you look at the CIA's now declassified document on the Kataeb, they literally list the document by name as this was the founding principle of the Falange party. It's called the Lebanon We Want to Build Up. It was a 16-page long manifesto. It's available on the internet. I read the whole thing like 3 times over. It's about what I consider pretty much the first constitution of what's called it's not even called the Lebanese Front. Originally, It was called the Fronts for Freedom and Man in Lebanon, because that's what it was based off of. And this is why I said earlier, the Kataeb party was not fascist. If anything, it's closest to modern day Christian democratic parties. It held a strong belief for a pluralist country that safeguarded the rights of all the religious members. It held a very strong belief in decentralization. It held a very strong belief in religious liberty and democracy and in pluralism and equality and all of these values that we take so granted in the West today. It was a Western influenced movement. And that's the biggest thing that he wanted to make sure that was known in the document. Before he really got to the parts like we believe in decentralization and federalization and all of these, the introduction is a sort of manifesto of what it means to be Lebanese. For Charles Malik, Lebanon was not just some entity that came up with the Arab invasion. It's not just some other Arab camel-riding state. It's not just some state that was carved out by the French. Lebanon is a culmination of 6,000 years of history, going all the way back to the Phoenicians. But not only the Phoenicians. We can say, we like a lot of the Kataeb, they often say we're Phoenicians, not Arab. But I only half agree with that, because we're not just Phoenician. We're Phoenician. We're every other country, the Romans, the Greeks, the Arabs, the French, the Crusaders, the Ottomans, every country who walked through our land. We adopted part of them.
We're not the Arabs.
No, we're not.
But Arabs are a part of our identity too. They can know we're special. That's the point I'm trying to make. Lebanon is not just some other country. It is a special country whose history cannot be cut. We are continuous for the last 6,000 years. And this is part of the Kataeb worldview. To safeguard the identity that was 6,000 years in the making of Lebanon being a bridge. Even since the days of the Venetians, we were a bridge between the Greeks and the Romans and the East and the Persians. We were always a bridge between the East and the West. Even in the words of Pope John Paul II, Lebanon is more than a country. It is a message. And this was the ideology of the Kataeb party that Charles Malik so adequately and perfectly wrote in that document. Lebanon has a special place for its Christian community because of even the Maronite Church. Of course, the Christian community is made up of several different denominations. But if you take the Maronite Church as the sort of example here, it's an Eastern Catholic church. It obviously has Eastern heritage, but it was an attachment to the West, with all the Catholic and Roman philosophy coming in from the West and all the Arabic philosophy coming from the East. And that was the point that the Kataeb was trying to stress under Charles Malik. And not just Charles Malik. That document was signed by Camille Chamon, by Pierre Jmeil himself, by Charles Malik, by Abbot Naaman. A lot of different people signed that document. It's not just Charles Malik's own eccentric, humanistic thought while the others were fascists. They all agreed to this. The point was to identify and guard that Lebanon that was so unique because of its unique position as the bridge between East and West. We're not just a part of Syria because our foundation and our history is different. We have a unique identity founded by this bridge of being Eastern and Western at the same time. We cannot be forced to identify the cause of the Arab world to the exclusion of the West because the West is part of us. But at the same time, Lebanon was not entirely to abandon the Arab world either because they are also a part of us. Even Pierre Jmeil, before the Palestinians became a problem in Lebanon, he was with them. He was with the Palestinian independence movement. After this time in the Lebanese Civil War, another figure named Bashir Jmeil began to rise to prominence. Bashir Jmeil was the most charismatic person we could probably all think of. He was a hero to everybody in the country because he was a strong leader and he did what a lot of people couldn't do. He united the Christian rifle. That was his slogan. He united all the Christian sides because there were several warlords. And Lebanon has always been plagued by this sort of sense of warlords. Because of the history of the country in such an isolationist environment, there was always that tendency for, family clans and people fighting over stuff like that. And that comes into the politics too. That institution of warlordship has always been there. Bashir Jmeil wanted to move past that. He didn't want the country to just be run by, this religious group here rules the rest, or this person here and this family rules the rest. He wanted to unite the country. And he started first with his own people. He united the Christian rifle under one party. And sure, not everything that happened in the Civil War under his leadership was perfect. Many things were committed. But that I consider a deviation from the ideology of the Kataeb party. Bashir Jmeil himself and the ideology that he stood for was not for all the massacres and whatever that happened. Those were unfortunately accidents when you place a lot of good people with a few bad apples in the mix in a situation where you're literally fighting for the right of your people. It was a defensive war. The Lebanese Christian movement was not about turning Lebanon into a state and kicking out all the Muslims or something like that. It was about building a state that was fundamentally pluralist, a state that fundamentally held the Lebanese national identity so that everybody inside of it could live in peace. It was a state that was meant to serve as a protective place, not only for the Christians, but a place by the Christians for everybody else too. Because none of us could survive on our own at that time. We needed each other. So we were put into this situation, and we're not going to just sit there huddled against our will. We're now going to be a constructive community fostered on dialogue and fostered on common identity as Lebanese. And Bashir Ismail sought to put that into practice. He founded what a lot of people today is called the Lebanese Forces, but it was not originally its own political party. It was originally the United Christian Military Front. And his goal, which Amin Ismail, his brother, tried to do after him when he was assassinated, was not to just keep a separate sectarian militia. His goal was to unite it to the whole army, because he didn't want each group having their own army. He wanted one state for everybody, a state that was bridged between East and West. And this is what goes on to the Kataeb party to this day. A lot of people today think the Kataeb party is more liberal or something than it used to be, but it's really the same on the inside. It was always an inherently Christian democratic party. It inherently stood up for pluralism and the rights of religious minorities, such as the Christians. And it always stood up for nationalizing the security. This is why we're against Hezbollah to this very day. Nobody should have weapons for the state. Under ideal circumstances, we would have one army for all the Lebanese. And yet it's still for federalization, because federalization also still allows each religious group to mostly manage its own state so that everybody can live in peace. So that every person, it's a less centralized state, so each area can manage itself according to its needs and according to their beliefs without infringing on the rights, and money transferring from every part to every other part. So to this day, we are Kataeb because we stand up for the 6,000 years of history that led up to this point. We stand up for a country that is more than just a random nation on the middle of nowhere, because it's a message for the whole world that the East and the West can coexist, in the words of Pope John Paul II. We stand for a country that has 6,000 years of history. One of the oldest cities, most of the oldest cities in the world are in our country. And we stand for a country that we are proud of. Our country is in a detestable state today. And as Kataeb, our goal as Kataeb members is to do everything we can to bring our country back. Otherwise, people my age, people like them, people like all of us, we will have no country to go back to. We will be stuck here forever. We have 6,000 years of history. Are we really going to let it end? Or are we going to continue for 6,000 more years? Thank you.
Thank you. Wow.